Hi, I'm Christine Daigle.
I'm Jena Brown.
I'm JP Rindfleisch.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So I'm trying. We just started the press train for the new 4MK book, which is
Yes.
awesome. Yeah, I just got it right up in USA Today, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to redo my podcasting, like my like just the look of it. So like I was picking Kevin's brain. I got blinds on all the windows in my office. I set up an LED light, so I'm lighting it differently. I ordered like right now. I guess you can see my last book is sitting up behind me on a shelf. Which looks cool when I have them, but like I'm not going to actually have this book for like another 4 months. So I'm trying to come up with something else, and like I keep printing like random things. I've been at my local FedEx Kinko's office like 4 times this week. Like I've got, I don't know
Yeah,
if you
I
can
see
see it, but
that
there's a stack back. There's a giant poster for the new book back there.
giant
I
book.
keep trying different things in this spot. I tried loading the cover on an iPad. Just so I would have that behind me, but that looked really weird on video. So I'm trying to figure that out.
I think you need a life-size cutout of somebody. I just have to think who it is.
Well, they're casting the 4MK TV series, but like I'm not allowed to say who's in it yet. So that would be cool though. I'd
Yeah.
love to get a giant cardboard stand-up of that.
When you can make the announcement, I expect a cardboard figure behind to be the
Yeah.
Yeah,
reveal.
get it printed out
Yeah.
and then put like black over it so it looks like a silhouette, and then the reveal you can pull the black off of it.
Yeah.
Very
There you
dramatic.
go.
There we go. That's cool.
All right. Well, we are missing Kevin. Kevin is
Yeah.
somewhere. Where it's like playing Where's Waldo, but where's
I don't
Kevin?
know.
Like, we
Yeah,
know where
he's
he is.
driving
Somewhere
from
on the
Texas
eastern
to
seaboard.
Pennsylvania. Yeah. He said where
Pennsylvania.
he was last night. I don't remember where that was.
I don't remember either.
I'm
He
gonna
was still
look
in
it up.
Texas last night, right? Like he said they drove for like
Texarkana? Where's that?
yeah.
I don't even know what
don't
that
Isn't
is.
that like Texas and Kansas? It's and like there's like a or maybe Arkansas. It's like somewhere in there.
I don't know.
Right.
Sure. Someone will tell us.
All
I'm not
right.
good at geography. That was my
I'm
worst
not
subject.
either. I never really understood like Texarkana as like an actual real place, but also like I think it's just like the states smashed together. I don't know.
You go.
I've learned everything I need to or that I know about Texas. I think from watching that TV show Dallas back in the day. Like that is my total exposure to Texas. That and I've been in and out of the Houston airport a million times because
I
that seems to
feel
be
like
like the hub for everything.
I
Yeah.
feel like that probably sums it up. Like I feel like you actually
Perfect.
have a nice, well-rounded education about Texas.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody wears cowboy hats. They all have like bull horns on the front of their cars.
Yep. Big
I
hair.
think that's a thing. Big hair. Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
hair. Yeah.
It's actually just like you step over the border into Texas and immediately everyone is like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
All right. Well, JP, you are officially Kevin today. What is in the news?
Great. I'm so excited. The publisher enlists bookfluencers to choose its titles. Is it working? This is an article from the LA Times, and they say that Bindery Books flips the traditional model by using book influencers as acquiring editors, letting tastemakers with built-in online communities champion titles, often by overlooked authors from acquisition through launch. The approach prioritizes real-time reader engagement over prediction. Influencers solicit community input early, promoting authentically and staying close involved editorially, giving most authors more support and visibility than they often get at legacy houses. Industry watchers see it as a promising but still unproven path, especially resonant with Gen Z, raising questions about scalability, but pointing to where publishing may need to go to stay relevant.
Ooh. So I'm looking at this. If you take a step back, what this really means is they're testing all these books before they actually come out, which means your marketing budget and everything going behind it might be 100% like based on the feedback that these people are getting. So if you don't get traction with those influencers at the get-go, like they may decide to pull back on your marketing budget before the book even comes out.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, this is kind of, it reminds me of, I read this article a while ago, but it was sort of like this is Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine model, where, she launched her production company at the same time as the book club, and she basically uses the book club to test which books do really well that she then puts into production for the movies or shows, which did really well. if it does well, but like you said, if it doesn't, then
Yeah.
maybe it won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. I've been seeing it on the mostly on TikTok because it's really prominent over there. I think House of Frank was one of the first four that came out through this model. It's really fascinating. Not something that I personally want to pursue right now, but definitely I really like the idea of pairing the author up with a tastemaker, which is your influencer, basically, that really tries to push and promote your book. I think that that's a fascinating way to involve influencers so that the author doesn't have to become the one and only influencer for their book.
Yeah. So they're essentially the acquisition editors. So the books are getting submitted as possibilities, and they are picking and championing the one that they love, right?
Yeah.
And then testing before production. It's an interesting model.
It is.
Uh,
I can see maybe how, I think sometimes about how books kind of start with like a really small but fanatic fan base, and then it kind of grows from there, and how, that's actually like a really sustainable, I instead of, kind of going broad, like just sort of building out from there. And I could see how this might help spark that with some authors, just get a really devoted fan base and then expanding out from there.
I mentioned at the beginning of this, I've got the prequel coming out for the 4MK series. So one of my first phone calls was to an influencer.
Oh, wow.
And we've been going back and forth for about 2 weeks now, and she roped in a couple of other influencers, and we basically have a think tank of, like, this is what we need to put together from a packaging standpoint. This is what we need to send everybody. This is the kind of messaging we want to create to get them excited about it. And the influencers themselves are helping me put all that together, and then we're going to disseminate it on like a broader scale. So I'm guessing they're doing something similar to that. So.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I mean, that is a totally different model than I would have done 5 years ago. Like, I would have never started with the influencers. They were usually, on the mailing list, and that was it, like after I already targeted, traditional media. So that's definitely flipped.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it might be a way of getting back to that authenticity that TikTok had early on before, when people were just promoting because they love books instead of really doing it because they're getting paid to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're doing this from step one, it's because they really love this book. And I think that's because, people are a little burnt out on hype books that don't live up to the hype. So I can see like why they would do this and want to get back to people authentically loving and promoting books.
Yeah.
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 Interesting. I'm curious to see how it goes. I think there's some opportunity there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Up next, Audible now lets you read along with your Kindle books. This is from Publishers Weekly, and Audible has introduced Read and Listen, which is a feature that syncs word-by-word highlighted Kindle text with audiobook narration inside the Audible app, letting users read and listen at the same time. Access requires owning both formats separately. Users must already have the matching Kindle ebook and Audible audiobook. There is no bundle through Prime included. Ebook can qualify. Audible says feature boosts engagement and comprehension, citing internal data and surveys showing higher content consumption and improved retention.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I'm honestly going to try this with my daughter because she's still
Yeah.
struggling with reading. And like when I read to her at night, I always use my finger and kind of follow the words and things like that. I think this could be huge at least for me. I mean, and I'm going to take advantage of it.
I remember having books like this as a kid, like on tape, where you would read and listen to the tape. So I think that's cool. But yeah, this seems to be like a back and forth with Spotify, because Spotify just did that, right? Syncing with the physical books, and now Audible is answering back. So it seems to be some of that competition between the two of them.
Yeah.
Do you think you could do this though? Because like I don't think my brain would let me do it.
No.
Like focus on the words and listen at this. Like it's almost like a not enough stimulation or something all at once.
I don't want to do that. I listen to audiobooks when I'm driving or walking, and then when I'm sitting and relaxing, I want to read, and I don't need to listen to it. But I think, if you're an English language learner, or if you're a child, I can see how this would be really useful. Yeah.
Or
Or learning another language.
non-neurotypical.
Yeah.
Or non-neurotypical.
Non-neurotypical.
Yeah.
I do sometimes really like doing both at the same time, just because it helps me keep focus on the story.
Yeah.
So I really like it. I definitely would use something like this.
I mean, I do it when I'm proofreading. I'll listen
Yeah.
and proofread and stuff like that too. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, reading out loud. It's an interesting thing. I am such a weird audiobook listener because I can only listen to audiobooks when I've already read the book, and then I typically try to find like a full cast or sort of like I love graphic audio where they do like the whole like sound effects. And so I actually don't want to listen to it like sped up. It's kind of like a like I really want to be immersed in it. So it would be really hard to follow along because I read faster than obviously like people
Yeah.
talk and
Yeah.
the pauses. So I don't know, but then I think like with some books like literary like that really like those dense books like that actually might help a little bit. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm very curious about it.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. Last bit of news. DNF shelves are coming to Goodreads. For those that don't know, DNF is did not finish. After 20 years and users making their own DNF shelves, Goodreads has decided to acknowledge this widely used convention and make DNFing official. In an email to users earlier this week, the platform announced that DNF shelves are coming soon. Per that email, here's what to expect. If you created an exclusive custom shelf named exactly did not finish DNF, etc., a bunch of different things, you're automatically converted to this did not finish shelf. If you created a tag or non-exclusive custom shelf, it will remain unchanged with one exception. Those currently named exactly did hyphen not hyphen finish will automatically rename to did not finish 2 to avoid that duplication. So if you prefer to keep your current step, rename your shelf or tag anything else before February 28th.
Man, I'm going to write a book called DNF.
Perfect.
Get that out there.
I'll be on everybody's shelf.
You know, I am so fascinated by this because as anyone who's used Goodreads knows, like they have refused to do any updates or like make their site usable for like 20 like forever. Goodreads, like I like Goodreads and I've used it for so long that the idea of changing is like so daunting. But also like I think I was trying to find a book and that started with this instead of the, but every other word, including the author, was correct and it said doesn't exist. Like, why Goodreads? Like, why? Anyway, it's very exciting that maybe they'll make more changes.
Yeah. I would love for the rating system to also include like a do not or did not finish as a rating, because
Yeah.
I think that often some like
People
I
one
don't like
star it.
rating books that
Yeah.
I didn't finish because I didn't finish it. So instead I would rather have that type of rating. And maybe that's just a personal preference, but I think that like for someone like me, I want to be able to mark off books that I didn't finish. And I almost feel like in order to do that, I have to give it a star, and I don't do that. So then it
Yeah.
just goes back into the abyss.
I see a lot of one-star reviews that just say DNF, which is, is fine, but I don't know, maybe that book just wasn't for you.
Yeah.
You could put
And
it
that's
on
the
a
thing,
DNF
like,
instead of 1 star. Yeah.
yeah, like when I DNF a book, almost all of the books that I've currently been DNFing, I can see how other people would rate it
Right.
high. So I don't want to 1 star it because I don't feel like that's applicable to the book. I just realize that it doesn't vibe with me, so I would rather just go away from it. And I don't think that is the same thing as a 1 star.
No.
Okay, so that was going to be my question. So if this is basically an option, you wouldn't give the same weight to like a DNF versus a 1 star. Like when let's say you're looking at a title that you're thinking about reading, you're obviously going to look at both of those things then, like 1 star and DNF.
Yeah, because like to me, a 1 star is like you hate the book, you hate something very explicit about it in a way that you may have finished it or you did finish it, but there was still something so objectively wrong with it that you want to say something about it, even if you don't write it in a review. Whereas like a DNF may be like the writing style just wasn't for me, but I can understand that other people love this book, so I'm just gonna back out of it and I'm just gonna say DNF.
Yeah.
And to me, those are like two very separate categories.
Yeah.
I could see a lot of
Sometimes-
abuse happening with this.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I wish Goodreads had. I mean, Goodreads is owned by Amazon. They should be able to tie this back to a verified purchase. So, like, I'm thinking that if somebody's going to take off DNF, they should have to. Basically,
Oh,
it should be
yeah.
a verified
People have
purchase.
abused it with
they
1
have,
stars.
but I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen this. They did do an update, and I don't think they talked about it, but I was reading a book and I was reviewing it, and it's an arc and it comes out. And before it would let me give it a star review, it made me say how I had the book. So it actually, like, a pop-up screen came up. This is really new. It's never happened to me before on Goodreads. And it said, like, I got this from the author, from NetGalley, from the publisher. And it would not let you leave a star review until you chose one. Now it's not like really all that.
Right.
Was it a pre-release? Like,
yeah.
were you leaving a review before the book was actually released?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if that's the exception.
And so, yeah, that was actually really interesting, though, because that's been a complaint, is that, people will review bomb before a book comes out. And so it looks like they added this. Now, I mean, it's obviously easy to bypass because they're not like making me submit like a picture of the book, but it's more guardrails than they've ever had before. So I thought that was really interesting.
No, I think honestly, your first comment is really valid. Like, Goodreads has not made any change whatsoever in a decade. And now all of a sudden they're making a change. And like, Amazon originally bought Goodreads just to keep them under their thumb. They were, it was growing too fast and had a big hold on their particular market. So they just bought it to keep that, from getting out of their control. So I'm wondering if this means that they've got a shift over at management and they've decided that Goodreads is, should become something more than what it actually is right now.
Yeah, I think that there have been a few apps that are actually finally threatening them too.
Storygraph is one.
Storygraph is really making some headway. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe that also has something to do with it, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know that manuscript you've been editing for the past year? The one that's almost done, but never quite gets there? Well, right now, it's crying out for help from this episode's sponsor, AutoCrit. Quite possibly the most powerful all-in-one writing platform, AutoCrit puts an entire publishing team in the palm of your hand. Get access to customizable automated alpha and beta readers, plus series-wide story analysis, marketing support, line editing tools that can help you catch the mistakes you miss, and even more, including exclusive craft events only for members. The value is insane, and right now you can grab lifetime access for just one payment. No monthly fees, no usage limits, no caps, no tokens. At AutoCrit, unlimited means unlimited. It's time to finish your book. Start making real progress, escape revision limbo, and publish with confidence story after story. Check out autocrit.com/JD to save 50% on lifetime membership right now. That's autocrit.com/JD.
Okay, JD, who is up this week?
This week we've got Ian McGuire on. Ian's the author of numerous novels. He's also an instructor at the University of Manchester Center for New Writing. His latest book is called White River Crossing and it releases February 24th. Here he is, Ian McGuire.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Oh, hi, Jena. Thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the book, which was just an absolute delight to read. Anyone who loves historical fiction, particularly with like those tense thriller sort of tendencies, I think will really appreciate this conversation. So, yeah, let's dive right in. Yeah, so what is your writer origin story? How did you get started writing?
I mean, I've always, I think since I was a teenager, I was always wanted to write. I think I remember sort of saying that to someone when I was probably about 18, but I think I didn't really know what kind of thing I wanted to write, really. I think I started off thinking I might become a journalist, but then I studied English literature at university and just sort of, I mean, I was already kind of very much into fiction, I think, and poetry, and then studying at university just reinforced that. Kind of fell in love with the kind of literary tradition. Britain and also American novel became very important to me. So yeah, that was how I started, and I suppose since then I've always had sort of two parallel careers. So I've been an academic, and I still teach at university and teaching not just creative writing but also American literature. But then I've always been also writing fiction at the same time. So I think I thought the first right at the beginning, probably quite a clever decision that writing was a good thing to do, but it doesn't always make money. So it's good to have a second career, and so I've managed to have both at the same time. And it's for me, I've been very fortunate that it's worked out well. The lean times when I haven't been making any money for the writing, I've still had a monthly paycheck, so it's worked out quite nicely for me.
Yeah, and I imagine that sort of being immersed in literature too, just sort of day in and day out, sort of like feeds that creative part as well.
It does, that's absolutely, and I think that's one of the great privileges of teaching at a university, is you just get to live with these great works again and again. Every year you reread them and teach them and find something new, and they just kind of enter your bloodstream, and it's really good. It's really good for a writer as well, just to live with those classic texts. So yeah, that has been hugely helpful to me as well, I think.
Yeah. So how do you sort of, I guess, balance, an academic career and a writing career?
I mean, overall, it's been fine. I mean, there've definitely been periods where I felt it's been tricky. I think periods of my academic career, sometimes it gets very busy and there's a lot of pressure, and then if you're trying to write something at the same time, it becomes kind of frustrating and difficult. But overall, it's been great, I think. I mean, I work at a university where you're encouraged to write and to research, and my writing counts as research from their perspective. So that's sort of built into my contract, that I'm supposed to be doing that and supposed to be producing work. So there's an encouraging environment, and now I work primarily within the creative writing program. So I've got other writers around me who kind of, so we have a little kind of group and community which helps each other out. So it's worked out really well for me. But I do think I've been lucky. I've been lucky in the people I've worked with, and lucky with the institution I've worked in as well, that it hasn't felt like I'm just being squeezed and trying to do too much at the same time, really.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty amazing to be able to have that support, particularly with being able to research, which we'll get into it in just a second. So as you approach this, great behemoth of writing, you have your research, but when it comes to actually writing the novel, there's people always approach it very differently. Do you find that because you are doing sort of that more research-oriented type of writing that it lends itself to outlining, or do you tend to just sort of, go in there and see what happens? And
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Those are the two poles, aren't they? And different writers, some people plunge in and just find their way to the end by hook or by crook, and some people plan everything out in tremendous detail. I guess I'm halfway between those two poles. I definitely like to have a plan. So I will have a plan, and the plan, particularly in the sort of first few chapters or the next chapters I'm thinking on, can be quite precise, and then it gets slightly vaguer. But also, over the years, I've realized that my plans never work out the way I intended to do. So I have a plan, but I kind of know that it's not going to work. The novel isn't actually going to look like the plan, but it's still important to have a plan. I definitely think I couldn't move without having a plan. But at the same time, I have to recognize that when I actually try and do what's in the plan, I quite often realize that actually that doesn't work. Or that idea which seemed good in abstract, when I actually try and make the characters do the things that I want them to do, that I realize that they're not going to do those kind of things. They want to do something different instead. So I'm forever throwing away my plan and writing a new one, and then maybe that'll get me through another few chapters, and then I'll have to throw that away, and so on. So it's that's how I work. It's a bit I've got used to it by now. I suppose at the beginning I used to think that was a problem, but now that's just the method that I use.
The method and the madness. Yeah, I imagine. I imagine. I kind of think like historical fiction feels a little bit daunting, because even though the stories themselves may not be, the details or the inner workings may not be true, a lot of the people tend to be true. So there is sort of, I guess, a guiding framework when you initially start. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's another kind of spectrum there in terms of historical fiction and historical novelists. On one end of the spectrum are people who are very, very invested in everything being as accurate and precise as possible, and the other people who are it's sort of fun, and that's the background. And if I need to change things or tweak things or just utterly do something that would never have happened, that's fine because I'm just trying to create an enjoyable novel. So
mhm.
I'm definitely more towards the historical accuracy end of the spectrum. I mean, whenever it's possible, I try and know how things would have worked or things would have happened, and to have that happen in the novel. Partly just because it gives me a sort of added confidence. I think if I feel this is true, this is real, I feel like the story has a kind of weight to it.
Hmm.
Um, that it might not otherwise have if I was just inventing things for the sake of it. But then even I think even if you are on the end of the spectrum, there are always moments where you have to decide: am I going to go with strict historical accuracy, or am I going to do this thing which I really need to happen for the story to work? And so there are always moments where you tweak things or change things a little, just so the story functions. I mean, yeah, I think that's inevitable. um, I mean,
Yeah.
I think the writer who is kind of probably I think of as being most on that end of the spectrum is Hilary Mantel, the kind of the British writer who wrote kind of Wolf Hall novels about Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell. But even she made up a few characters because she had to have these characters to do things. So everyone tweaks a little bit. It's just how far you want to go in that direction, I think.
Yeah, which I think is actually really interesting, and touching back on that, the research element, I think writers, we're always researching things, right, to bring that realism to the page. Obviously, historical fiction, your research is much more intense. So how do you go about sort of like tackling that research and then balancing, that accuracy with the story? I mean, you kind of mentioned tweaking little things there, but how do you personally kind of decide like where to lean heavier towards the research and where to lean heavier towards the creative?
Well, actually, I mean, one of the things I usually discover when you do the research is how much is not there. So when you're doing this historical research, you tend to discover, and I think as a novelist, you tend to be drawn to the gaps, to the things which are not in the historical record. And then that's where you can kind of invent, and that's where you can explore, and that's where you can offer something which a historian can't offer because there is no evidence of that. So my most recent novel, in White River Crossing, the gap that I wanted to explore was the relationship between the Englishmen who were in Canada and employed by Hudson Bay Company, and the indigenous people that they worked with or knew. And in the sources that I encountered, there's plenty of information about the indigenous people, but there's not much sense of what those relationships were actually like, and how on a day-to-day basis did they get on, and who was in charge, and how did those power relationships work, and what if they argued, what happened. So that was what I was most interested in. And in some sense, all the research happened around that, and that central question was just something that I had to figure out for myself, really.
Yeah, I love that, being drawn to the gaps. It sort of touches on like, I think all writers sort of start with a what if, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that gap is the
Yeah.
what if. Um, it's interesting when reading, White River Crossing and looking at these relationships and sort of like expanding on that. How do you decide, what you're going to write next? Where do these ideas come from?
Well, I think when I start or think about starting a new novel, it's always a kind of messy process for me. I mean, I usually will have a couple of ideas, a couple of vague ideas. So I'll start sort of exploring. I'll start exploring one or two, and then what usually seems to happen is, the first idea that I try, for some reason it doesn't quite work out. I mean, that seems to always happen. I can sometimes spend quite a bit of time sort of looking into something and thinking about what the story might be like, who the characters might be like, but then sometimes you feel like it's not going to hold together, or there's some problem that I can't resolve. So you go to plan B. So White River Crossing was definitely plan B. It wasn't my first. And actually, the weird thing about White River Crossing is that all I had in my notebook was a fort in winter. That was the only sentence. So I'd written it down at some point, and I was like, "Oh, what on earth did I mean by that? And why did I think that was a good idea for a novel?" So that with that sentence, I just then started thinking, well, where could this fort be, and who could be living in it, and what might the stories be around the people who are living in it. And weirdly enough, that those few words led me to the novel in the end, through a process of just reading and thinking and following up various leads.
Wow, that's actually quite impressive because, I mean, the fort is real and many of the people are real, and like that's very documented, so that you just sort of were like, well, let's see what happens. Do you just sort of start kind of diving in and think of a time frame and then just do a broad sweep of different forts in the area and see what kind of stands out?
Well, the thing that led me from that phrase, which is gives you almost nothing to actually a story, was another book. I mean, Cormac McCarthy famously said books always come from other books, which I think is sort of true. So in this case, my book came from a book written published in 1795 by a man named Samuel Hearne, and it's a story of him walking from this Hudson Bay fort where the novel begins to the north coast of Canada, of what's now Canada. So he was the first European ever to make that journey. He made it alone on foot, alone, but accompanied by indigenous guides. So it's an amazing kind of travel story, and a story of sort of survival and endurance. But again, a story which has lots of interesting gaps in it as well.
Yeah.
So that gave me an idea of a story structured around a journey. And then in that book, he was sent north because they believed there were copper deposits. So he thought he was going to find a copper mine. But in the novel, I change it to gold instead, because gold seemed much more interesting than copper.
Yeah.
Much more, so that the excuse is they're going to look for copper, but what they're really doing in the novel is looking for gold. So yeah, once I read Samuel Hearne's Journey to the Northern Ocean, that gave me the structure, and it began to give me some of the characters as well. I mean, the novel in the end is quite different from Journey to the Northern Ocean, but once I got my hands on that book, I felt I could definitely move forward, and everything became quite clear to me at that point.
Yeah, I can see sort of like how those would be parallel and kind of get that sparking those ideas. When you're talking about, sort of writing this, and the books lead to books, and when you're doing your research, obviously historical documents outside of diaries tend to focus on events, right? Like it's this happened and then this happened and then this happened. And obviously when you're writing a story, the events are almost secondary to the characters, right? You need those characters to feel like they live and breathe. So how do you get into the minds of your characters, particularly when they're based on real people?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. That these records don't give you the kind of emotional or psychological detail that you need as a writer to build up as characters. So I think, I mean, as a historical novelist, you're trying to kind of imagine and identify yourself with characters who are very different from you. They lived a long time ago. They may come from very different sort of cultures, and their lives are utterly different from yours. So I think for me, the only way you can do that is if you also believe that you do have something in common with these people, that as a human being, you share something in common with these people, even if they're on the surface, they seem utterly different from you are. So that's kind of where I begin, that I can imagine their experience. If I allow myself to think, it's very different. The way they live is very different. The kind of history is very different from mine, but at the same time, we do have a linkage. So for me, that's kind of crucial. And if I kind of believe that, then I can feel like I can humanize them. I can make them live. So yeah, that's how I go about it primarily.
I love that, like finding that commonality, particularly, I guess, do you find that difficult? I'm thinking of one character in particular, and I don't want to go too much into into details for spoiler reasons, but one character in particular who's not exactly pleasant. Sometimes history is, you've mentioned, can seem quite distant from us, and we kind of like to, I guess, imagine that we're a bit more civilized these days. But how do you handle dealing with those types of events and characters and mindsets when you're dealing with the past?
I mean, I think there are, in terms of sort of villainous characters, to want to put a better word. Yeah, I mean, I think there are two ways I approach that. One, for some kind of villainous characters, or some of the nastier characters in my novels, there are reasons why they're nasty. So there's a kind of history there which sort of explains, may not excuse or justify what they do or how they behave, but there's a reason. Other characters in my novels, there isn't that much of an explanation. I decide for some reason not to offer too much of an explanation. And I think with those characters, I usually just sort of settle on a sense of what is driving them forward, what is motivating them. The old question, which is, in creative writing classes, what does this character want? Mm-hmm. What are they after?
Yeah.
And if I get that clear in my mind, this is really what they want, this is what's motivating them, and then that usually allows me to make that character sort of work. And having a sort of nastier or less pleasant character who is highly motivated is quite good, because it gives a kind of motor to the plot, that they're going to go and try and get what they want, whether people get in their way or not. So it pushes everything forward in a way that can be very useful.
Yeah. Do you ever struggle with I guess there might be a tendency to soften the history a little bit. Maybe not, I just imagine when you're reading these things, and there is a situation in your book where unpleasant things happen, and I guess I'm just wondering how, again, that balance between the creative, the recognizing the humanity in characters and leaning towards historical accuracy, like how you balance all of those different threads when dealing with those, not just the unpleasant characters, but the unpleasant events as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think people often ask me about violence in the novels. The last few novels are quite violent in different ways, which some people, just can't quite. It's too much for some people. But I suppose my answer is usually, I really hope that violence doesn't seem kind of gratuitous or there just to sort of titillate people's interests. I like to think there's always a kind of reason why it's there, and it has a sort of function, thematically a function in the story. I mean, in this novel, it's really a novel about the British Empire in some ways. It's about these Hudson Bay Company men, these white Europeans who are arriving in Canada and inserting themselves often quite violently into these existing cultures with often disastrous effects. So I think in this novel, the violence is there as a kind of the violence of the British Empire, which happened all over the world. You know, Britain took control of these places. It didn't ask permission. It just forced its way in, and it kept control through direct or indirect acts of violence. So the violence of this novel is kind of imperial violence, I think. Even when the violence is not committed by the British people, it's sort of started by them. They disrupt this situation, and it has these unintended consequences which spiral out of control. So that's one way of answering that question. A second way is that I do sometimes have the violence happen kind of off screen. Sometimes I show things straightforwardly, but sometimes, and there are a couple of examples in this novel where we know it's happened, we don't see the blow by blow account, and that's often because some things I don't particularly want to write about. It's quite painful and difficult for me to go there. So I think and there's no particular pressing reason for the story to show everything blow by blow. So you can get dramatically the same effect or even slightly better effect by just seeing the aftermath or realizing what's happened. So though the novels are violent, there are acts of violence which aren't shown, which are just implied.
Yeah, I definitely think that there are some very violent parts in the book, and it was really interesting to read, you know, which ones were on the page and which ones weren't, and sort of how you can still feel those emotional ramifications, you know, especially as they ripple outwards throughout the novel. I thought that was a really interesting thing to sort of think about after, you know, reaching the end and kind of processing everything. What, if anything, do you hope readers take away from your work?
Well, I hope it's an enjoyable read. I hope it's a kind of entertaining read. But beyond that, I think, as I said, it's a novel about a particular historical moment, and about empire. And I think the empire and the ramifications of empire are still with us. Certainly in Britain, I don't think we've completely come to terms with our history and the consequences of that history, and the idea of empire as this extraordinary force which mixes people up racially and in terms of nation. And I think the kind of complexities of the modern world are often a consequence of empire or imperialism. So I feel like, you know, although it's set in 1766, it's about subject matter which is still with us. So I hope people will find that interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of interesting things to pull out of there, things that have happened and things that continue to happen, even if the specific details are a little bit different. But yeah, I think that's always an interesting thing when you dip your toes into history, I think. Well, as we wrap up, and man, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I could talk a lot more, but we'd probably get into spoilers, and we don't want that. So no. We do like to wrap up with the same question for everyone, which is, what's one piece of advice you would give to new or aspiring writers?
Well, the advice I guess would be, I'm a person who believes in reading as feeding writing. So I guess my main advice would be read widely. And I think the other thing to follow on from that would be, don't be afraid to be influenced by the writers that you really love. I think sometimes people who are starting out are just so attached to the idea of doing something fresh and new and original, and they're scared of being seen as kind of copying something. But actually, for me as a writer, and I think for other people as writers, the moment where you say, that's great, and I'm going to do something like that, can be really liberating and really helpful. And I think if you've got a talent, then your voice will come through even if you're learning and the structure and the idea is borrowed from someone else.
I actually really love that. Yeah, I definitely think yeah, you'll inspiration is always good. And like you said, your voice will come through as unique and different if you're working on your craft, no matter
For
where
sure,
the
yeah,
inspiration strikes.
exactly. Yeah, because it's coming from your experience, even if you're being influenced by another great writer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so very much for your time today. It has been a pleasure. Anyone who likes historical fiction should definitely pick up White River Crossing. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Jenna. It's been great.
So getting paid to have a job and do your book research is like the dream, right?
Sort of like Indiana Jones being a professor and getting to run off and do his thing.
Yeah, I know. When he said that, he's like, well, it's in my contract that, I'm given a certain amount of time to research. It's like, whew, man, that's that is incredible.
Yes.
What would you do if you were paid to research? How would that change how you approach writing a book? Just out of curiosity.
I hate to research.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm being autistic. Like, to me, it's all about the productivity. It's about getting the words down on paper. So if I'm spending 5 minutes on Google researching something, or to me, that's like it's wasted time. But I get where you're coming from. I've got a lot of friends that they go down that rabbit hole and like they love the research. They will spend their whole day doing the research. Researching this one little thing. To write one paragraph, they will spend hours and hours trying to figure it all out. That has never been me.
No. So what do you do when you come across something where it's like you want to get it right, but you have to do the research? Like, will you just make yourself do it?
Yeah, I mark it with 4 X's, and I put them at the beginning and the end. So if I'm typing absolute BS just to fill something up, if I think I know how something works, but I'm not 100% sure, I start that paragraph and end it with 4 X's so I know where that little flub is. And then when I go back through on my second draft, I just search out all those X's, and that's where I'll actually take the time to hop on Google or call an expert or shoot some emails off or whatever I need to do to just fine tune it.
Yeah,
That's really
I do that too. Like when I don't know how something works, I just like put TK science or like whatever. And then I'll look at it later.
I do like if if it's a place, like I wrote one that took place at a subway station in Chicago. It was a particular real subway station. Like I will do that on the fly. So I'll load up pictures of the subway station, like 4 or 5 different shots of it, any kind of descriptive stuff. I'll just put that in front of me as I write it. So I guess it kind of depends on what type of research it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do
Same.
that too.
Yeah.
Real estate. I love going on real estate sites and finding a house.
Oh, yeah, those are fun to kind of go through and look at. I know. I guess the risk, though, is that then you end up like, 10 neighborhoods away looking at houses outside of your price range for no reason. Maybe that's just a me problem.
No, I would
sounds
be
like a you
afraid
problem.
though. Yeah, if I got money to research, because I get sucked in sometimes, which is why I try not to do it when I'm writing. I'll do it at like when I'm in the writing mode, I'll try and do it later because I'll get sucked in and then I get time blind. So I'll
Yes.
be like Googling something for a ridiculous number of hours. So I'm glad that I don't kind of have paid research because I think I
Yeah.
could get stuck there and then the work wouldn't get done.
That's very true.
Yeah, I think it would depend on what the research is.
Yeah.
If like honestly, if I could do research within the discipline that I had in college or, something along those lines, and in tandem with those discoveries, write something that has that information in it in a fun way, sort of like Christine does with, mind interfaces. Um, I think that would be super fun, but that's sort of a different question than what you're asking. But definitely, if I could get paid for that and write, yeah, why not?
Yeah, that would be fun. I really liked what he said, obviously in historical fiction, particularly like the type of stories that he's writing, like there's a lot of like violence that happens. But I really liked how he talked about sometimes the aftermath is more effective in showing like actually how atrocious an event was versus showing the actual event. And I was wondering if you've ever found that in your writing and how you decide, to use it when you put something on the page versus when you just show the aftermath, how you make those decisions.
I wrote a book with Patterson called The Noise. I think it was our second book that we did together. And in the story, there's a particular infliction or affliction that hits large groups of people all at once. And we didn't want to explain what it was. So for like the first half of the book, all we did was show the aftermath. And it was like a really horrific scene, but like you didn't understand how it happened or why it happened, but it was really bad. So we needed to come up with like 4 or 5 of those really bad scenes to keep it interesting, to keep them different. But we got, I think it's about halfway through the book before we actually tell the reader what's really going on. But yeah, I mean, you can really dig in. Like I remember one of the very first scenes that we did like that, he had a dead baby. That we just glimpse, like our main character just sees it, but like that emotional reaction that brought on, and in a situation like that, it's almost like finding one on a battlefield kind of thing.
Yeah.
That to me was way more powerful than ever seeing what actually caused it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read that book and the baby was horrible. So thank you for that, JD. In a good way, though.
Yeah. I think too, like with the type of cozy fantasy that I write, I don't really shy away from like the horrors of some things. So like I wrote one where the main character has like PTSD from a really severe event that happened to them. And so we kind of start in that aftermath of like how they've been processing and it hasn't been well. And then they have these sort of flashbacks, and I don't really shy away from that, even in cozy fantasy, because like we all know that things will end up okay, but I think that the style that I write includes those traumas and sort of processing through that grief, and I think that that's really where like some of the meat of cozy fantasy can be in.
Yeah. Like, I know I've done that too, especially when I feel like the violence is too horrific.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to show that on the page because it's too much.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah.
that's when like showing afterwards what happened, and it's the emotion and how that ties into the story that really makes it more powerful than, the blood and the gore.
Yeah, he talked about that too, just on sort of like how he doesn't want to sometimes just go there, like himself personally, but then also, making sure that the violence doesn't seem gratuitous, like it's just on there for shock value, which I think, depending on the genre, like obviously,
Right. Yeah, if you're writing a slasher, go ahead.
yeah. But even then, like it can be too much. So, I guess, well, I don't know that JP really puts a lot of violence in his cozy fantasy books, but
A lot of people died in one of them.
Maybe you should.
you should, yeah, just some nice graphic on the page gore. But for JD and Christine, how do you decide what that balance is when you're putting like violence on the page?
Most of the time, the less you show, the better. I try to feed the imagination, so I just come up with these little triggers, like little things that I know are going to basically flower in somebody's head. Because if you get too descriptive, I think it takes away from it. It's not scary, it's not gross, it's not, but there's little things you can just throw out there, like the baby. Like we didn't have to explain how it happened or why it happened, but it's the fact that it was there, looked a certain way, like that just, it tears at you. And that's what you want. And, unfortunately, that's what you want to elicit.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, I read something somewhere recently about, they were talking about showing versus telling, but really it was that you want to invite the reader to be with you instead of like kind of at a distance. And I think that's kind of what you're saying is like you're inviting like the reader's imagination into the world versus you controlling the whole world. I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, Patterson, one of the things that he got me to do very early on, at the start of anything, we write the words "be there" up at the top. Like right now, it's on my computer monitor. It's literally been there for like the last 5 years. But like you have to be in the scene. The reader has to be in the scene. The reader has to be discovering things right along with your character. The second you start describing it or have your character describe it, all of a sudden there's too much distance. It needs to happen right then and there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got Lila Lane coming on. Lila is the pen name for Sonia Hartle, author of the rom-com Rent to Be and Heartbreak for Hire, as well as several young adult novels. Her latest book is called The Best Little Motel in Texas, a mystery which releases March 3rd.
Yeah, it's going to be great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.